الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت. الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and they not accept on the state of Islam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Indeed, the only successful one is the one who died on the state of Islam, being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lift the anguish and all the difficulties and the calamities that our people in Gaza are going through. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to support them, to help them, to safeguard them, to protect them, and to bestow upon them His immense gift and rahmah, and pour on them patience. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help their mujahideen and destroy the zalimeen. Amma ba'd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anfal, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: وَإِذْ يَعِدُكُمُ اللَّهُ إِحْدَى الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ أَنَّهَا لَكُمْ. The very amazing aspect as a believer, you'll find everything you need in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I said, مَا فَرَّطْنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We have never, nothing has been neglected in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the guidance, it is the mercy, it is the way how you find your way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the light, it is the life. And all what a person needs in his journey of life is in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And today, going through all this horrific, as you see, the demonization, the genocide, that one has to always go back to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see his compass, his own direction that he need to be adhering to, and put himself and herself on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Surah Al-Anfal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال إِذْ يَعِدُكُمُ اللَّهُ إِحْدَى الطَّائِفَتَيْنِ أَنَّهَا لَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised you, one of the group is going to be in your hand, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to confer to you the upper hand over one of these groups. And all one of these groups, as those who study the seerah, they know very well, we're talking about the battle of Badr, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we promised them either to get al-iru, which is the caravan, or the nafir, or to be heading toward the army of the disbeliever or the mushrikeen to fight them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this ayah, Allah promised you to get one of them. However, you were wishing to have the unarmed group. So you were wishing to have the caravan. قال ذاتي غير ذات الشوكة, because the shawka in Arabic, it has kind of significance, or like imply that there's a sword, there's something is going to poke, there's a death, there is fear. That's why some of the companions, they didn't like, to go ahead and to go fight. Because fighting is something that not people they like, as we're going to mention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the fight was prescribed and inscribed on you, decreed on you, but it's something that is not, you dislike it. It's something natural in the life of a human being. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here, قال, bet you were wishing to have the other group, the group which had the caravan. So the caravan with Abi Sufyan, you get, the spoils, not spoils, actually is what they have taken from them in Mecca. This is their own money, the companion, the muhajirin, to take it back from, because they took it to, help finance their caravan and their transaction. That is really property of the believers. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed for something else. Willed for something else, which is for the believer to fight the disbeliever. And here, subhanAllah, the difference between al-iru and nafir. Al-iru, which is the caravan, is representative of the worldly life, the gain of the worldly life. However, the jihad and the qital and the nafir is to head and march toward, the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fight an army that is against you, that are transgressor, and they want to exterminate you and so on, and to stop you from conveying the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is, subhanAllah, the balance. The balance here, which one you'll choose in your life. Which one you choose in your life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no any remorse on the believers by choosing or wishing the other part. Because none of them had the idea that they're going to meet army, that they're going to be, subhanAllah, they're going to die. None of them had the intention to do that. So having the cozy one, the simple one, the easiest one, that's what they were longing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, no, that should not be. Because there's another great objective that every believer has to live for. Every believer. Every believer. So if the companions, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim, they have been satisfied to get the unarmed and to have the upper hand on the group which is the caravan, then everything had been perished. It's been gone. All the camel and the money they get is gone. Then what is going to be benefit the next generation to the end of time? However, when they go to the Nafir and they fight, and subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to have on their hand the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be shown, to be manifested, to be a guidance for the generation to come to the end of time. Therefore, into the ear, which is the caravan, there is the longing of the worldly gain. But in the other one, there is the victory, there's the triumph, there is, the karama, the honoring, there's the guidance for the generation to come. So there is, subhanAllah, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established and He made to call Al-Furqan, which is the criteria. And it might be for some people, when they think about, victory is to defeat and to overcome the enemy and to get everything, and get the worldly gain from spoils. That's actually what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reproached the believers when they were asking about the spoils of war. That's not the objective. You are not here for the spoils of war. The victory that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted you is not for the spoils of war, to have your heart directed and inclined to the worldly gain. Because if you do so, then there is no continuation of this deen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified, clarified what is then the objective. قَالَ يُرِيدُ اللَّهِ Allah wants, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to establish truth and to uproot the falsehood. قَالَ يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ بِكَلِمَاتِ Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will is to establish truth with His words, with His ways subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَقْطَعَ and uproot the way of the disbeliever. لِيُحِقَّ الْحَقَّ to firmly establish the truth. To firmly establish the truth. وَيُبْطِلَ الْبَاطِلَ and uproot falsehood, to the dismay of the wicked one. Even the wicked one, they dislike it. So dear brother, respected sister, then for the believer, what is your goal, your ultimate goal in your life, is to establish the truth and to uproot the falsehood. This is the content, this is the meaning. This is the meaning of the ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I worship Allah. What the meaning of worshiping Allah? What is the objective of worshiping Allah? What is guide you into the worship of Allah? What motivates you in the worshiping Allah? Is to love the truth, to stand for the truth, to struggle for the truth, to contribute in establishing the truth. For this reason, here what happening today, it is from the part that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exactly like subhanAllah, we are reading Surah Al-Anfal. So establishing the truth and uprooting falsehood is the objective is the highest purpose of the believer in his life and in her life. Therefore, if you have a group that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made to be truthful, fighting for the truth, then your heart must be with them. Now, the question is, when someone subhanAllah thinking inclined to worldly gain, thinking, if we make the analogy today, there's people that only think about the ear, not the nafir. The ear with the caravan, money, spoils. Not the nafir where there is like struggle, striving, fighting, potentially death and so on. The people who incline it to the ear, to the caravan, to the money thing, you find them justifying this should not have happened. The fight is saying, for example, you see like if you hear things subhanAllah from some Muslim, you'll be shocked. Some of them, they said, why they should provoke a mighty army, and look now, subhanAllah, the disaster that happened in Gaza. These people, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told about them, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا, those who are not wishing to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not because they are not believers, they are believers. قَالَ بَكْ وَرَضُوا بِالْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, because they have been pleased with this worldly life. وَاطْمَأَنُّوا بِهَا, and they feel secured and they feel tranquility toward this worldly life. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ آيَاتِنَا غَافِلُونَ, as a consequence to that, they become like fully heedless of the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they will not be regarding the importance of their purpose of life, which is to establish the truth, to live for the truth, to fight for the truth, to stand for the truth. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it to be clear in His book. And this is subhanAllah, turn to people to have such subhanAllah disease in their heart, they will justify things to have their path to be validated. And whoever who follow them is going to be one of them. Because these people are truly conflicting, contradicting with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran. Because some of these people, we ask them, how then are you going to fulfill the intent of Allah in His creation? Intent of Allah, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His creation is to establish truth. And dear brother, establish truth, what it means? To establish justice, to stop oppression, to give the people their rights, to regard the human as they are human, to regard them, to hold them in high esteem, to be fair with them, to have that social justice, to have, subhanAllah, that kindness, that all the element that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, that is establishing the truth. To eradicate arrogance, stubbornness, to make things like clear for people who, to make the best among the people who, and the best honored among the people, the one who has piety, the righteous person, not the one who has $1 billion and killing right and left. That's not. So this is meaning the establishing truth. We're not talking about something that, mysterious. Establishing truth is to be just. Everyone has the truth in his heart. You know what is truth. What makes you angry when you see the ongoing genocide? Because you have the truth in your heart. Because you're still alive inside. That's what it means. So the people justifying such a thing, they are inclining or actually falling into the trap of the loving of the worldly gain. So you ask these people, how then are you going to establish the truth? How are you going to establish, the justice? Are you saying that these people, they need to be pleased by the injustice they live in? They need to be pleased by the, subhanAllah, be under apartheid state? Are you saying that these pleased to be fully accepting to be humiliated? Fully accepted to be, subhanAllah, the rest of their life under the oppression? And it's like they are in prison. Is this how to justify it? That's why, dear brother, respected sister, the answer is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No and no and no. You have to stand. And it is sunnatun ilahiyyatun wa amrun shari'. It comes from both sides. It is a divine law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will establish. Will establish without, subhanAllah, the effort of the believer. He's going to establish, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second is an order and command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do so. In the first one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the beginning of Surah Al-Qasas, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. And we will, our will, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, is to confer favor upon the oppressed one and to make them leaders and to make them the inheritors of the earth, because they're going to go on and spread the justice, spread what is good for the people, what give life for the people, what give happiness for the people. وَنُمَكِّنَ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and will establish them on the earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about the followers of Musa here. And to show the arrogant Fir'aun and Haman are their soldiers or the minister, that they were like, they being, khati'in. They were mistaken about all of this. And they will show them what they used to be fearing. They were fearing that one day maybe these people, they're going to come against us. Against them, not by their effort, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala company. And here, dear brother, respected sister, then you ask yourself, do you truly have this purpose in your heart? Because this is a sunnah from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to establish it regardless. The second is a command from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, prescribe upon you is fight. Fight when it's needed, when it's required, when it's fight that is right for it. Like the case that you say. The case when you, subhanAllah, you push and you liberate yourself from oppression, you liberate yourself from transgression. That's the right fight. That's the liberation you find in all the constitution of the world. Lest you find it in the book of Allah or on the people of the faith. Everyone is saying that is validated. And you can read even in the resolution of the United Nations, that is something that is, imminent for someone to do such a thing. But let's be with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to get, but just to tell you that something that is justified. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a command. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, prescribe on you fight, despite that you hate it, you dislike it. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. To show that the believers, they do not have the intention to go fight and slay people. No, this is because it's a necessity. It's a necessity. كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, this is what is good for you. So He said, are we going to have all this disaster? Are we going to have all this killing? Yeah, Allah said, yes, it is. It is, imminent for you. This is an obligation for you. Then how are you going to implement and fulfill the intent of Allah on this universe? If you will not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take you and bring other people. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about the follower of Musa alayhi salam, that He going to confer upon them the favor and He gave them establishment of the earth. How many kids, how many children they died, killed by Fir'aun? How many, subhanAllah, how much, punishment and, subhanAllah, persecution they have, encountered in their time. So it is, subhanAllah, part of the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when you say the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, be careful when you see such a thing. I remind you, never Allah ceased to be the most merciful. Never Allah ceased to be the all just. Never Allah ceased to be the loving kind. You have to have this in your mind. Because some people, they're questioning. Because if you're questioning, you question yourself in a heart that the more you question, the more you are filling your heart with disease, with illness. But here, dear brother, respected sister, when you know this is sunnah ilahiyya, this is a divine law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to establish regardless. And it is a command from Allah, then our people, what they have been doing to really liberate themselves is justified, and it's held by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's held by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will support them and He will help them. Because it is in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this purpose that every believer has to have to establish the truth, to fight for the truth, to stand for the truth, to love the truth, to become like your guide, that your willpower into your life that is guide you, motivate you, and drive you is the establishing of the truth. Enjoying good and forbid evil is one of them. To be a nice person, honest person, people to deal with you with honesty and to be faithful to each other, it is from establishing the truth. So the establishing truth you do it within yourself, then within your family, and in your relationship with everybody around you. And then when it comes in establishing the truth in the way of the society, is to establish the justice all over. And this justice could not be implemented only under the governance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, under the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the worldview of the book of Allah, or the divine worldview. So one of the most important things in establishing the truth is that the deen of Allah will be manifested. How people are going to know about Islam, how people are going to be attached and attracted to Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us through two aspects. The aspect is this criterion. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show and make it clear the criterion, which is the criterion, the distinction between the evil and the good, between the truth and the falsehood. When you have this criterion, then people, they will see, subhanAllah, the emergence, those who do not know Islam, the emergence of something that they didn't know, beautiful, that is called Islam. يُرِيدُونَ أَن يُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They want to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, with the news, with all the crooked things that you hear, and all, subhanAllah, the falsification. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to fulfill His light, with us or without us, and regardless. وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. هُوَ الَّذِي, He's Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, who sent His messenger with the guidance and the religion of the truth to have it be manifested. How is it going to be manifested? The manifestation of the deen of Islam, to be clear, known by everyone, is to establish the reality of the Quran, is to establish the worldview of the Quran. What it means? It means what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, that what is going to be occurring and happening in the world, not what people plan. Not what people plan. Not like what Fir'aun he planned. His plan didn't, subhanAllah, work. Why? Because Allah's plan is always the upper one. وَيَمْكُرُونَ, and they plan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans, Allah is the best of the plan. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. Therefore, when you adhere to the book of Allah, you see in this subhanAllah big crisis that we're going through, the manifestation of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how the criterion becomes very clear, the criterion distinction between good and evil. You see, and we talked about it, how people, subhanAllah, the hypocrisy is very clear. People, protagonists of human rights now, they are watching, and so it was not from their heart. It's all for a gain life, for a worldly gain. Nothing have to do with the substance, nothing have to do with the principle. The only principle that someone will fight and stand for, it is when it is in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is in your faith, in your belief. If you take the example, how the manifestation, I'll give you example. The example of patience, perseverance, against Fighting, the other hand, is the stubbornness and arrogance. Who's going to win? In the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the winner is the patient one. قال إن الله مع الصابرين. Allah is with the patient one. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إنما يوفى الصابرون أجرهم بغير حساب. The perseverant, those who endure patiently, in time of calamities, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them with no measure. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said an amazing ayah. The angel, when they enter paradise, when the believers are in paradise, and the angel comes to the places and homes and this big castle of the believers, they will be greeting them, say, Salamun alaykum, bima sabartum. Salam and greeting to you, peace upon you, because of your patience. Therefore, subhanAllah, the patience, when you see it today, how it's been manifested among the people of Gaza, it became an example for the people. Example for the people. Because when they see such a thing, they said, whoa, this is not possible. How these people, they endure all these calamities. Go back to the Quran. This is how the truth of the Quran is being manifested. And you can see it. It's all over now. How people, subhanAllah, they're adhering, they're accepting Islam because of seeing the face of patient ones. Therefore, here the criterion, you have a battle between patience and arrogance. And the patience give you guidance, give you rahmah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Give you, subhanAllah, that perseverance and on your deen and uprightness on your deen. So because give you the patience, help you to conserve and safeguard the yaqeen, the certainty that Allah is always with you. Because death, it's not the end. Death, subhanAllah, for the believer, it's just a passage to the bliss of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The arrogant, because he is stubborn and he has, subhanAllah, that feeling of grandeur, he's going to keep trying all his best to destroy, but in trying to destroy, he's actually destroying themselves. Like Fir'aun. He changed his mind. He said, قال وابعثوا في المدائن حاشرين. Like the news, because the news before is to send in all the town, and they say, إن هؤلاء لشرذمة. This is our wicked people. They did this for our emperor. We have to punish them, and all of them, let's go. After he promised them to let them go, and how subhanAllah he's heading, and when he's heading, he was heading to his destruction. What made him to be head to his destruction is his arrogance, is his disbelief. His disbelief and arrogance, what subhanAllah was driving him toward his death. Because if he was a little bit humble, he would have stayed back. You already sent them. You told them, you said to Musa, after subhanAllah, the sign is one after the other, the blood and the locust and all of that, and you still insisted. Subhanallah, then in the book of Allah, the winner is patience. And the only, subhanAllah, good consequence in patience. So when you see people, they seeing such a thing, they say, wow, this is the deen of the truth. لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you make the analogy with the surah of Ghazwat Badr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the believer, they believe in one God. The disbeliever, they believed in 360 gods. But the 360 gods could not help the disbeliever, because the one God destroyed them all. Today is the same thing. The people, subhanAllah, of pressure, and the people who, subhanAllah, are doing all what you seeing are doing, they are holding and fast to all their system, to all their power. So their God is power, is money, is lobbies and everything. But they have against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who do you think is going to be the winner? And that's how the Quran will be manifested and the religion of the truth will be shown. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, the companion Ridwanullahi alayhim, they were just 319, according to hadith of Umar. And the believer, they were over 1,000. A small group defeated the big group by the leave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the Quran. This is haqiqah Qur'ani. This is in the Quranic truth. This is, you cannot implement it in the life. This is impossible. It's not going to work. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing you otherwise. He's showing you that when you have the truthful heart, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever means you have, Allah is going to be with you. And no one can defeat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the haqiqah of the Quran. Therefore, when you say establishing the truth, establish it first into yourself by believing in such truth of the Quran. By believing in such worldview of the Quran. Because who's the one who conducting all the affairs of the universe is Allah. Not anybody. Not anybody. Not a nation, not a power, not people who have weapons. Not anybody. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, dear brothers, respected sisters, ask yourself, what is your purpose in your life? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given us this test. And we said this is a test for the whole ummah. And to really put your side, to take a side. Which side are you going to take? But the side that you're going to take is just by uttering some word. No, you have to struggle, you have to work to be really worthy of that side. Because the people who do not like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already planned for them. Be careful. All what you're seeing from the news, falsified and tricked and twisted, they are meant for heart, diseased heart, to justify their path. And Allah said it in the Quran. We said, we made for every prophet enemies, devils. They are devil from human and shayateen. Devils. Shayateen al-insi wal-jinn. Devil from human and devil from the jinn. They are inspiring each other, decorative speech, to, subhanAllah, lead people to delude them. And this is what you see, subhanAllah. Falsify things like, sometimes when you see some of the proof, what they're saying, you'll be laughing because you see like he's so, subhanAllah, he's so tricked. But yet people who believe in it, they don't believe in it because of the truth, because their heart are expected to do ill thing, so whatever thing that comes to justify what they have in their heart, they embrace it. وَلِتَصْغَى إِلَيْهِ أَفْئِدَةُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. For the heart who have disease, who do not believe in the hereafter, to be receptive for those talks, for those speeches. Why? Because they are, subhanAllah, motivated for it. They want to justify. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in the way of uprooting the falsehood to show those people who are truly far from the path. Far from the path, so they will not have an opportunity of mercy in the day of judgment because they insisted on doing that. One should ask a question. If someone does not have this purpose in his heart or her heart, what they are now then? They are betrayers. They are betrayers. They betray Allah and His Messenger. Truly. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. O you who believe, do not betray Allah and His Messenger and your trust, nor betraying your trust. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَخُونُوا اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ وَتَخُونُوا أَمَانَاتِكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And know that your children and your wealth is a test. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the best reward. Because when someone, subhanAllah, inclined and his heart is attached with the world again, what are they going to do? They're going to only think about one thing, to preserve it. Therefore, when the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes, they are scared. They cannot remove themselves. That's why they want to find justification. But this justification goes against the way of Allah, which makes them to be on the path of betrayers and faithful. And this is Allah saying, not me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying. For this reason say, ask yourself, how can I have a truthful heart to not fall into among the betrayers? Among those who betray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, in a very concise way. There are six actions. 3 in the heart, and all in Surah Al-Anfal, you can check it. And 3 in action. The 3 in the heart, when Allah is remembered, look at your heart, how does it react? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned and you are careless, you have a long road to work. Because when someone says Allah, how big Allah into your heart? How big? It trembles, it does not tremble. That's the first action. The second action, when you read the Quran, does increase your iman, does increase your motivation, does increase your knowledge, does it help you to do better in the way of Allah? If it's not, you have a long road to go. When you are acting in your life, are you trusting and relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If not, then you have to work to become a believer. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the believers, those when إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. These are the 3 that I have mentioned. The other 3 is in action. The first one, anything that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Messenger, it is what gives you life. So you have to answer to the call of Allah and His Messenger. Anything is from Allah and His Messenger, that what give you life. Do not look at the content of the message or the instruction from Allah and Messenger. But if you know from Allah His Messenger, then you say, this is in my life, is my life. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم. The second thing, when you answer the call of Allah and His Messenger, you're going to implement it. So what you're going to say? I hear and obey. ولا تكونوا كالذين قالوا سمعنا وهم لا يسمعون. Do not be like those who said, we heard and they didn't hear, because they heard and they disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third thing is to be grateful to the gift of Allah. To remember all the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. Because the remembrance of the gift of Allah help you to safeguard your uprightness. Help you to always, think of Allah. Then your heart will be more trembling next time Allah is mentioned before you. Help you to read the Quran with more contemplation and pondering. So it helps you to immerse more into the meaning of the Quran. So it increases your iman. These 6 that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, it help you to develop for you that criterion with which you will be able to help in manifestation of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with which you will have the ultimate purpose of your life is to establish the truth and uproot falsehood. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran how many small groups they overcome a big group. And this is in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's a fact, it's a reality, and it is the truth. However, to be fulfilled, you have to have that truthful heart. And this truthful heart is the one who has taqwa. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu in tattaqullah. If you fear Allah, if you be mindful of Allah. So how can we be mindful of Allah? By implementing those actions. And this action is not like to make them like, separate element, but all comprehensive to help yourself be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And have this objective. Because if you do not have this objective, we're going to be unfaithful betrayers and will not be able truly to fulfill, our purpose of life. We'll be like, like everybody else, engorging themselves, indulging into the dunya way. But what is going to end them? It's going to be end them losers. No happiness they will see, no tranquility they will find. They will be always depressed and anxious, not knowing where to go. But when you are in relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every step in your life is head in front of you. You know it calculated with the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us an example of a young man. He was a young man at that time. And he had this truthful heart, a heart filled with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a heart filled with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to be expressed by the love of establishing the truth and the love of uprooting the falsehood. Because in establishing the truth and uprooting falsehood, that's how you're going to achieve the well-being of the whole universe. Period. This young man was Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood alayhi salam, if you see the steps, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala empowered him and established him on earth to be, and then to be a king. He started by a normal soldier. A soldier that he was in the army of Talut. And then when they marched, he encountered the test of the river. Most of the people, they drank from the river, so they stayed behind. Dawood didn't drink from the river. Then the people, when they left, they said, this is not possible to encounter the army of Goliath, of Jalut. There's mighty army. That's not possible. So among them, the true believer, those who are certain that they're going to meet Allah. قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقوا الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة. Those who are certain to meet Allah, they said, how many small group? They vanquished a big group. One of them was Dawood alayhi salam. Because of that heart, truthful heart. Then when they came, subhanAllah, in the battlefield, they make the dua, رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا الصَّبْرِ. When they said, وَاللَّهُ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ, look, the sabr comes back, and Allah is with the sabirin. So if you lift yourself and elevate yourself to the level of being patient, then know certainly that Allah with you. And Allah will not let you down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the smile into your heart without even expecting it and without even knowing it. Then when they are in the battlefield, قالوا ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. Allah, pour on us. We don't need that patience. Pour on us. It's like subhanAllah, pour is like we deluge of patience, and give firmness on our feet and give us victory over the disbelief. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they defeated them by the leave of Allah. And Dawood killed Jalut. So the one subhanAllah who went through all the steps of purification, of a truthful heart, of motivation, of a great dedication, of a willpower that really to establish the truth and uproot the falsehood was Dawood alayhi salam. A young man. To see subhanAllah, everyone among you who will have this truthful heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do for him the same as he did for Dawood. Why? Because there's something to motivate you. The love of Allah, the standing for the truth, the love for the truth, the fighting for the truth. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help our people in Gaza who have the love of the truth. And they fighting for the sake of the truth, to give them the victory, to be with them, and to give them the establishment on the earth as he did for Dawood alayhi salam. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا أجمعين وتب علينا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارفع الغم عن أهلنا في فلسطين. اللهم انصرهم بنصرك يا رب العالمين واحفظهم بحفظك. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.